Next up this morning, we're going to bring up Veronica Major from the City of London, who's going to introduce our one of two guest speakers.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today to introduce our speakers. It's my privilege. Before I do that, I just wanted to mention, for those of you who aren't aware, remind you that the Ability First Coalition first began back in 2006. And at that time, its focus was to bring together employers to share success stories regarding best practices and experiences related to hiring and retaining individuals with disabilities. The City of London has been lucky to be one of the first members since the inception of Ability First, and we have truly benefited from our participation in the coalition. We would like to recognize the contributions of many of its members in terms of finding meaningful employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities and for helping to truly build a more inclusive, diverse, and vibrant community for all Londoners. I'm honored this morning to introduce our speakers, and who represent, both of whom represent true success stories in terms of hiring for Abilities First. Greg Boyle, who is the owner and operator of Tim Hortons in Sarnia, was scheduled to be our first speaker this morning, but unfortunately, due to a family emergency, is unable to join us. The good news is, though, that we have an individual, Mr. Bob Van Sickle from Community Living Sarnia, who has graciously stepped up and agreed to share Greg's story with us today. Bob will share Greg's experience that the Ability First model works and that an employer hiring based on the right fit and ability first results in business success. He will also share Greg's belief that disability is misleading and imposes false conclusions about an individual by not recognizing skills that will far outshine an identified limitation. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bob Van Sickle to the stage.
I have to admit, when Greg called me a couple of days ago, I had planned to just show up. I wasn't sure if he got the picture of Greg, and I thought maybe I could just kind of wing it and pretend that I was him. But then I thought, you know, the owner of 3 Tim Hortons stores, but then I figured that the 10-year-old Honda Civic in the parking lot and the cheap suit. You'd never believe it. I did, a couple of days ago, when Greg asked me if I could fill in for him today, he did send me a short email, and he told me that it would be okay if I read the email at the event. So I wanted to start out by doing that. So he said, Bob, thank you very much for doing this. As you know, my sister Sharon has had AVM, which has progressively attacked her body with strokes. For the last several years, Sharon was unable to move, all except her left hand. She's been unable to speak for a few years now, as the area of her brain which controls communication was the one that was most affected. In the last months, even her left hand has failed her. We all know she was happy, though, as she was able to watch her 2 children grow up as such amazing individuals. Sharon was also blessed with 6 grandchildren who gave her much joy and was still able to smile, which she often did. Today, if not very soon, Sharon will be free from her broken body. Thank you, Bob, for reading this speech today for me. With highest regards, Gregory Boyle. So I want you to know we really did want to be here today. So just a little bit of background before I start reading Greg's speech. In the last 3 years, Greg and his partner, Richard, have hired 10 persons with a disability through our services directly. The last person they hired, I think, about 4 weeks ago. However, I know that they have hired others that have approached their business directly that have a disability as well, and I'm not sure how many more. I'm extremely proud to stand before a room full of true champions. Today we recognize, honor, and celebrate local businesses, companies, individuals, and employers who understand that barriers need to be broken. These awards are extremely important to about 1.7 million Ontarians who identify as having a disability. Today's awards are also important to local businesses, of course, who realize that this translates to approximately $165 million in spending power, which grows to $1.3 billion of disposable income when you factor the friends and family of persons who have a disability. Thank you for asking me to speak today. You are all here because you value the need for accessibility in both work and leisure time. My name is Gregory Boyle. I was born and raised in Sarnia, Ontario. After several years in Windsor, my partner Richard and I returned to my hometown of Sarnia 6 years ago to operate a Tim Hortons restaurant. Today we own and operate 3 successful locations there. In 2011, we met with other Tim Hortons owners in Sarnia and proposed the idea that we become gold sponsors of the Ontario Parasports Summer Games hosted that year in the community. This sponsorship set the path for a partnership with Community Living Sarnia-Lambton. At this amazing event, our pride in this community grew and we resolved to become more involved in the community, which continued to reveal a more inclusive environment than we had initially expected when relocating here. Fortunately, Community Living Sarnia-Lambton had a booth at the Games. We stopped by for a moment to collect a brochure and chat with a representative. We had no idea how these few moments would take us on such a rewarding path, both personally and organizationally. Inadvertently, we strengthened our dedication towards building a business and team that is increasingly inclusive and accessible to the community, guests, visitors, and tourists who entered our doors. We've watched our team strengthen over the last few years as we've increasingly learned that the term disability is misleading and imposes false conclusions about an individual by not recognizing skills that will most often far outshine and identify limitation. Every member on our team has abilities, but some of those are just more apparent than other ones. Please allow me to tell you about a few of our best team members. Holly. Holly started to work for us when she could barely look you in the eye when you spoke to her. Today, 3 years later, Holly is a proficient supervisor at our highest volume location. She confidently leads her team during the peak time shift. Holly is an important asset to our team. When we met Lucas, we were struck by his enthusiasm and friendly demeanor. Shortly after his hire, Lucas had made such a great contribution to the efficiency of our front house of operations and guest first impression based on feedback that we offered him additional shifts from 1 or 2 to 5 days a week. His job tasks continue to expand, and he is a highly regarded team member. When Anne started as one of our first group hires of 6 years ago as a receiver in deep cleaning maintenance, she underestimated herself and was somewhat intimidated by responsibility. In particular, any duties related to technology. She immediately organized the dry storage and fridge and freezer areas and soon became the go-to person whenever any team required items. Soon her fear of computers was overcome and her role was expanded to inventory counts and then to ordering for all 3 locations. Jen is a self-motivator who takes such great pride in her job that she sets her own service goals. She also tells us and our guests how much she loves her job. She is consistently positive and upbeat. September 20th was Jen's 2nd anniversary with us. Her goal has always been to learn all positions and move into supervision. Last week, Jen successfully had her first shift as a lead shift supervisor. These are 4 of my best top 10 employees. They display dedication, reliability, motivation, and job appreciation. They are all outstanding service-oriented individuals. They all just get it. And they are all equally important to our organization. 2 of these individuals have a disability. The other 2 may or may not. I'm not really sure. Just as I'm not sure if any of them know if I have a disability. I wanted to tell you all of their stories because these are all employees that I'm very proud of. I'm proud of their contributions and I'm proud of their successes. The fact that 2 of them have a disability has no bearing on the fact that they've all raised the bar for the entire team. If we did not look at each of these 4 candidates for the skills that they could provide us alone, their ability first, then we would have missed out on at least 2 of 4 of our best. If we did not dispel negative myths and misperceptions of high expense or efforts to accommodate, then we would likely not have as strong a team. I do passionately believe that if we remain open and willing to provide tools and accommodations to job candidates with a disability, self-declared or not, disclosed or not, then we will not limit ourselves from recruiting the best possible candidates for the job positions we seek. Less than 5% of our team are trained to perform both front and back of the house job duties. Scott, who has a disclosed disability, can be relied on to be scheduled in both areas with a high standard of performance, capability, and reliability. The average turnover in Ontario for a Tim Hortons store is about 95%, with part-time workers at closer to approximately 120%. Our year-to-date turnover rate at Tim Hortons by the Bay, where we have operated for 6 years, is just 22%. We expect to see the same rate of decline in turnover as the team strengthen in our newest locations as well. Our team members who acknowledge that they had prior employment barriers due to searching in a non-inclusive job market are strikingly the most dedicated and reliable. With lower absenteeism rates, it is also these team members that tend to be the most available and willing to cover when there are sick calls or staffing challenges. Watching a team strengthen and become cohesive and seeing a culture of pride grow presents an extremely strong case, proving that any extra costs or accommodation with scheduling job tasks, training, or minimal modifications are tremendously outweighed by the higher cost of potentially more frequent hiring and training new employees. In today's tech-savvy world, businesses are receiving immediate guest feedback through online surveys, comment cards, and of course, still by just listening. Although much is constructive criticism, there is also those that take the time to pass along negative experiences as well. Noteworthy is that most of these compliments of guest appreciation about great service, high standards, or general positive experiences have been a result of a specific interaction with a team member who has a disclosed physical or intellectual disability, likely unknown to the guest. The most rewarding aspect of our involvement with these amazing individuals is that we have watched them grow into young adults with professional achievements and personal growth. They have made friends with co-workers, which has given them a whole new outlook on life. Scott now has his own apartment. Jennifer is closer to her plans of moving out of her parents' house and knows that she will. Coral and her sister Chrissy, and Chrissy is also part of our team, have recently returned from a trip to Europe. And they all continue to be a constant inspiration to the rest of us. I'm not here to tell you to hire a person with a disability because it's the right thing to do. There is much more to a decision of this magnitude. What I would say is that if you do not look solely at a candidate's core skill base as it relates to the job requirements you're seeking without misperceptions, and look at any required modifications as you would any negotiations you undertake for hiring the best candidates, then you're limiting your company's prospects. In an environment where having a strong team as opposed to a mediocre team can and will make all the difference for you and your competitors. Looking back to Jennifer's last day of her initial 1-week work experience with us, Richard asked her, "So what are your plans now that your placement's over?" She responded, "I'm going to work here. You're going to hire me, and I'm going to become one of your best employees." A little surprised at her response, he laughed a bit and said, "Really?" Today, Jen reminds us of this conversation and always says, "Told ya." We just respond, "Yeah, you were right," and we are glad she was. Thanks for listening. I hope that your journey will be as profitable and rewarding as ours is. Thank you.